And ask questions. I'm going to give you some basic information that'll allow you to do some of your experimenting. You should pay attention to what those things are. So we have non-fired, leather hard, starting to dry out projects. Okay, not all the color has to go on now, but adding color now will help you in the future for certain things, whatever that is. Now your options are underglaze and colored slips. They're different. Anyone want to tell me the difference? Mostly when we apply them. No one wants to say? I can't remember. So someone's got to help me. Just kidding, I can remember. Colored slip is slip, it's clay with some sort of additive to it. So we've put in mason stains. It's clay. If it goes on bisqueware, it will crack off. But if it goes on leather hard, it'll stay on there because the clay and the clay will bond together, okay? Colored slips are from over by the window. They're in these jars. And these are your templates. So if you, or your keys, and you find whatever jar or whatever color you want, this is 6021, it's on this one, and it's saying that, oh, let me click on that full screen. If you add on a good brush stroke, maybe two, and then bisque fire it, you're gonna get that bottom. And then when we add a clear glaze to it and glaze fire it, we're gonna get the top, okay? So that's your options with that color. If you want to make something that is less shiny or dull, that's what you're going to get. Okay, and that's with all of them. You can see how that works. And then we go, there it is. It may not look exactly like it is in here. Okay, it looks more pink, but for the most part, it should come out like it says on the pot. And it goes with all of these. 6006 is this one right here. Okay, and you have those options. But they have to go on before we fire them. Okay, underglazes. They say underglaze on them. They're found over here. And there's different kinds, and whatever it is, when you look at it, the color that's on there is the color it's going to come out once it's bisque fired and then glazed and glaze fired. It'll come out pretty similar to that. Unless somebody's done something weird to them, which they shouldn't have. So you can look through there for colors. Now, I'm gonna grab my paintbrushes and we're gonna put some colors on. Kind of a rule for you, if you put dark on now and then want to put light highlights, you're not gonna get them because light colors usually are translucent. So if I come in with black, and it's fairly thick, and I come in here and I add that on like so. Adding a yellow or a white highlight is going to be pretty hard to do because it's going to show through and the black's going to come. You might get something, but we go from there. Now, on wiping, there are different times you can wipe, and if you wanted to wipe right now, you could come in here with a brush and just barely touch the top, and you could take some of those, the high parts off. Okay, there is a slightly easier way to do this, and it is when it's bisque fired. Find one that's bisque fired. When it's bisque fired, and you need to know the difference, it feels like glass, it sounds like glass. If we come in here with an underglaze and paint that on, This is going on a medium thick. Okay. So we painted that on. When I come back, if I wipe it light, it's going to start to leave some. If I wipe it heavy, it'll leave less. I can come in here though. And those are all the slightly recessed areas. So they're indented. So you can do that on the Bisqueware so much easier, which also brings us to this. If we have something like this that was made, yellow was put onto it. Yellow is also down in those little dots. It was bisque fired. It comes out. You take black and put it on there and then wipe it down, and it goes down in those little dots. So you have yellow now with the antiqued black in the dots and a little bit on top. Then we clear glaze it, fire it, and it comes out shiny like that. So it's a similar thing, but to this, but we're using two colors. Okay, if I put on yellow here and then black and then tried to wipe it so that there was black down in the recesses and yellow on top, it's going to wipe the yellow away as well, right? So we've got to choose when we do something to get the results we want. Yeah?
Up to how many times can you fire it?
As many times as you want. Yeah. If you have something you want to do and you're like, this is going to take a few firings, because say you're putting on one light color, but then you want to do a little bit of a darker color on top of that, but on top of that you want to put black or something like that, and there's wiping involved in between, then you're going to do it, and what you do is you write a note with your piece and you put it in there with the pieces to be bisque fired, although yours is already fired, and you're right, Mr. Jones, I would love this bisque fired again. I have something else I want to do to it. That way I can just see it and go, sweet, we'll bisque fire that, and then we'll go from there. But that does bring this up. When we do any application of heavy underglaze and wiping, and if it's been bisque fired, you need to let it dry. So if I get this all done, I wipe it down, and it all looks like this, I've got to let it dry for a couple of hours, for you, a day, before I glaze it. Because what happens is when it dries, it's not actually evaporating. The water's actually going into the Bisqueware, and it holds there until it evaporates. And if I have a lot of water in my Bisqueware right now and I go and dunk it in my clear glaze, that clear glaze is going to sit way out here, and it's going to have a higher chance of running all the way down. Okay, so as we go, make sure that if you wipe anything down, you take it, you put it on your shelf, let it sit there for a day, come back in and glaze it. And if you can't remember, and you're like, I know I was supposed to do something or not do something, come show me your piece, we'll talk about it. It's no big deal. Yeah?
So wait, if I want to make it white with like black.
In the lines?
Yeah. Are we not allowed to dip these and then do that? Does that not work like that one?
Not really. You could, we have a white. I'm not going to put white on because I don't want to go grab it, but I'll put a yellow on. So I have yellow. This is a colored slip. And I have this area here that I want yellow with black outlines. Put that on. You'll probably be a little bit more meticulous than I am, but that's okay. We come in here, we add that. It's going to shrink a little bit as it dries. Those lines will show up. We'll bisque fire it. Then I'll put black on it and wipe it off. It'll go down into those grooves, okay? Which would be something kind of like this. Although that's just the white clay and then the black on top of it. So it'll highlight all those little things. The harder you wipe, the less, here's a good example, the less ghosting you'll get, but you'll still get a little bit just because of how black works. Yeah. Any other questions that go along with that? What else do I want to cover? You can do multiple colors. So if I came in here and I wanted to put yellow up top and then orange and then red and go down, you can do that as well. On wiping things off or adding, lighter colors are harder to see, both in before it's fired and after. So as soon as this is dried, this yellow, it's going to be a little bit lighter than that. It'll be harder to see the details. You just got to assume they're there, right? We hope they're there. Oh, this. That's, so far we've just talked about thick. So we put it on straight out of the bottle. I want to talk about washes themselves. Oh, yeah. So a wash is just water and your underglaze. So we're going to come here. I'm going to grab a little bit of underglaze, stir it in there, and you can play around with thickness. She talked about really, really watery. Maybe if you go a couple of different thicknesses, you go, oh, I liked how this one worked over this one. I'm just going to add a little bit of water to that. Stir that up real good. Now, these are little specimen cups. Okay, they've never been used for specimen. Just so you know, if you don't know what that means, don't ask. They're in here. There's some on the cart. But if you want to play around with color mixing to see what happens, come grab one, clean it out, and then you're like, I want to do like an orange, and you can see what that wash looks like. And then you can just put a label on it. This is an orange wash, underglaze. Put it on your shelf, okay? Because if you get a good result from that, you now have the start to work on your next project if you like it, okay? If you don't, we can dispose of it later. And by dispose, what we'll probably do is throw them all into one container and then see what color it comes out as at the end. But washes, it's nice and stirred up. You can come in here. I got these lines. One of the things about washes, it tends to run. So I've got these lines here. I'm just going to set it right there. It's not super runny, so that's good. And we're just going to run that like so. And it's going to go like that. Anywhere that it's darker right now, that pigment's going to stay and soak in. And then when we're done, it's going to be darker there. Anywhere where it's lighter, it'll be lighter. We can wait for it to dry, and we can wipe it a little bit if we want to. Like this right here. So we have, I put it on, and just looking, excuse me, looking at that, I think I want it a little bit darker. Maybe just in a couple of the spots. So I'm going to come in here on this little square. One of the great parts about doing these texture ones is now we have lots of options for doing them. And I'm just going to set it for doing different colors, different patterns. Set it there, and it's just going to sit. And it may be a little bit dark down here at the bottom. Maybe I'll soak a little bit up. I don't want all that there. Or I could wipe it down a little bit before I bisque fire it. You can sand it or wet sand it with a diamond, not sand. You can wet sand it with my diamond pad. But if you, well, we'll talk about that later more, but you don't get to shape your piece with the wet sander. You're just like barely hitting it. So if you're like, oh, that's a little bit too dark and I want a little bit of a light highlight, you can come in with the wet sander, get it wet, and hit that, and it'll sand that dark off those high spots. But we're not shaping it. We're not trying to be like, oh, it's square and I want it round. That's not what we're doing with the wet sander. What else do I need to cover? I think that's it. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
So could you just bisque fire your like pieces like right now, or like a piece like right now, and then add the and they're glazed, and just kind of wipe it down, and then just fire it again, and then put a clear glaze on it?
Yes. You can do that. You can play around with it. The biggest reason why you would want to add something now versus later is it's one less thing you have to do. So if you want to have something that has color on it, but also the black lines, adding the color now is great. You could add some now and go, oh, I missed a spot, or I want to add some more, bisque fire it again, then put the black on, and then glaze it and fire it again. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just trying to save you one step if you don't need that step, right? We don't need to spread it out if we don't need to. Any questions? Any other? That's good. Anything else? Any what ifs? Could I's? Yeah.
So with this project, do we need to do that on each one?
Not on each one. I want your projects to go and start moving in directions you want them to go. I do want you to play around with some stuff because you might get a result that you're like, I really like that. On Tuesday, you're going to be done with this. They're not going to be bisque fired yet. I'll give you about 15 minutes at the beginning of the class to maybe add a little more color. And then we're going to set them out in groupings, and we're going to walk around and look at each other's work. And then we're going to talk about them, and then we're going to turn them in. And they're going to get bisque fired.
All 6 or just 3?
All 6, but you have to fire 3. Yeah. Other questions, comments? Nothing else? Okay, remember those first things, right? What do you want it to look like? We're getting to that point where you've got to start planning that out. You can't just hope for the best and make it happen. You got to plan it out. So, okay, that's it. Go ahead and work the rest of the day. You have 30 minutes.